How's this doing? And I'm playing with the pain tonight because my daughter gave me some kind of bug. So my lungs are filling up. And even though I have a cough button, I am doing the Ricolas. There was one. Phone on mute. The boss doesn't like the extended, artistic, much better openings. She wants them short. So I had to edit it. Instead of actually fast forwarding it, I actually did an edit. So it's lame though because I like the long one. The boss has some weird rules. Says that guy. You don't know the half of it. Fuck the Huskies. Fuck those Huskies. I'm watching them right now.
Brian Suits on KFI.
I would bomb the shit out of them.
They're on ESPN.
Dark Secret Place with Brian Suits on KFI.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here live until midnight. The world's always melting down. This is your one-stop shop for the metrics, the indications, and the symptoms of the world melting down. And boy, is it melting down as we speak. All kinds of stuff. ISIS apparently in their final hours in Raqqa. Meanwhile, the Iraqi federal government is invading, and I'm doing air fingers, the Kurdish region of Iraq, and possibly the Kurds are talking like they're ready for a civil war. We'll get to that. The latest from North Korea, and then the company that used to be Blackwater is now Academy. They're based in the United Arab Emirates, and a story is breaking today that apparently the Emirates were going to hire this company to invade Qatar and overthrow the emir. So we'll get to that. By the way, I'm streaming live on YouTube. If you go to unsheepyourself.com, one word, unsheep yourself, not unsheet, because it makes no sense. Unsheep, like bah, so don't make me spell it, but unsheepyourself.com, and you can see the live stream of Dark Secret Place and more. Well, let's start with this. Syrian Islamic State fighters. This is from Reuters, which is an actual news service. This is not from like some dude on the tweeter machine. This is from Reuters. Syrian Islamic State fighters are set to abandon Raqqa in a staged withdrawal agreed with U.S.-backed Syrian militias that have them surrounded, a militia spokesman said on Saturday as the jihadist defeat in their former Syrian capital edged closer. Officials give conflicting accounts of whether foreign fighters would also be leaving the city, where the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, dominated by the Kurds, have been battling to defeat the Islamic State since June. The SDF spokesman, Talal Silo, said the foreign fighters would be left behind, quote, to surrender or die, close quote, without saying when the evacuation of Syrian fighters would take place. However, a member of Raqqa's civil council, who was appointed by ISIS, Omar Alouche, said the evacuation would include foreign fighters. He said it would take place overnight into Sunday. The jihadists would be taking some 400 civilians with them as human shields. So sadtrombone.com there. The final defeat of ISIS at Raqqa would be a milestone in efforts to roll back the caliphate that the group declared in 2014 in Syria and Iraq, where earlier this year it was driven from the city of Mosul. So Raqqa was their safe place. It was their happy place. It's where they minted coins. That's where in Raqqa and Mosul is where ISIS actually had currency made of gold, the way Quran prescribes. And they declared the caliphate, in 2014. And I've told you for 3 years that they're basically an Indian tribe off the reservation. They're being chased away now. What this leaves in its wake is now with ISIS on the run. Now it goes back to the original way that the Syrian civil war began, which was the Syrian Defense Forces, which we invented, and the so-called Free Syrian Army. And so with ISIS out of the mix, and they still exist. I mean, there's still thousands of them, but they're moving south, and their exit is being blocked. They can't go into Iraq, and now that they're having to actually move in vehicles in daytime and nighttime, they're being killed in piecemeal here and there. The NATO is killing them. The Russians are killing them. So the end of ISIS is I'll be surprised if ISIS makes it to the end of 2017, to be honest with you. But that doesn't stop the Syrian civil war. And so the dynamic that we have now, and again, I've been telling you that the Syrian civil war is over. The war against ISIS is over. The only people who are not aware of that is the United States. Everyone else is picking sides and outlining what borders they want. And the Kurds being the first of those. Hang on a second, I have to cough. All right. So the Damascus, Tehran, Baghdad, Moscow alliance looks like it's firming up as well. And so whatever we seem to think the Iraqis might owe us after pulling their bacon out of the fire, their fat out of the fire with ISIS, they don't feel like there is such a debt owed. And what they are doing is they are tightening up their relationship with Iran at a time when we should want Iran to, leave Iraq, and maybe we leave a residual force larger than 5 guys in Iraq. But that's not what's happening, is that in all likelihood, when the Iraqis very quickly, very soon, are going to say, all right, well, the country's ISIS free, so thanks so much, NATO. Thanks for everything you've done. Feel free to leave the vehicles. And here's some flowers and chocolate, and we'll call you next time there's a crisis. So that's going to be happening pretty soon. And some Iraqi authorities are quietly telling NATO members, specifically Americans, and specifically American special operators, don't get too used to being here. We're going to ask you guys to leave pretty soon, because they want to be left to their own devices now. And one of the number one action items on the Iraqi agenda is keep Iraq intact and don't allow this Kurdish separatist referendum, this vote they had 2 weeks ago that was 93% yes, let's split away from Iraq. They're nipping that in the bud militarily as we speak, because the Iraqis have announced when they dropped leaflets, and I had one of my translators who was luckily he was up. It was 7 o'clock our time when I called him, but I sent him a picture of a leaflet and he translated it for me. It's a I think I did I retweet it? I'm not sure. If you don't know, I'm tweeting at Dark Secret Place, now verified with a blue check mark, so I'm okay. But the Iraqi military dropped a leaflet, a very American-style leaflet, such as one that we would drop, and they dropped it on the city of Kirkuk, and it said, everyone stay indoors. If you have weapons, either surrender them or leave them outside your door or whatever, but we're coming into town. Don't resist us. Don't shoot back. We are heroic liberators. We are coming back to make Kirkuk part of one Iraq. And the whole thing. Well, it's the problem is that the governor of Kirkuk, a Kurd, it referred to the Iraqi government as the enemy, and he told the Peshmerga, the Kurdish armed forces, to defend Kirkuk. And so far, no shooting. But it's unfolding as we speak. They're supposed to go in there at 2 a.m. Baghdad time. So just to get you all on the same page on this, let's see, Baghdad time. Right now it's 8:11 in the morning in Baghdad. It is 1:42 p.m. in Pyongyang. It's 8:12 a.m. in Moscow as well, and Greenwich Mean Time is 6:12 a.m. So that's the situation on the ground. The sun's come up in Iraq, and so far no one has shot at each other in Kirkuk, which is a good sign. But who's behind it, and what does it mean for us and the whole thing? Well, it's not good news, but I'll tell you what it means when we come back right after this. All right, so far so good. The stream is staying up. So go to unsheepyourself.com. You can watch the live stream, and during commercials and stuff, I'll answer questions. And hell, even during the show, I'll answer questions. All right, we'll be back right after this. Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
People are now reported killed in this series of fires in the state's wine country. This wildfire event is
I would love to do the morning show in KFI.
reportedly offering up to $10 million to anyone that can provide information leading to the impeachment of President Trump. Fox News report Smith is running a full-page ad in tomorrow's Washington Post detailing that offer. Authorities in Florida say an 8-year-old girl has been killed in a fall from a cruise ship at docking.
St. Barbara's Day, if for those of you who don't know, every branch of the Army has a patron saint, and the infantry, I forgot who theirs are. Cavalry is St. George, because St. George is the only saint who's depicted on horseback. And then for the artillery, it's St. Barbara, which is a dude. And we have an annual St. Barbara's Day dinner. I was never really into the artillery that much, but they're fun. They're St. Barbara's dining in is pretty fun. It's an insane drink fest. But St. George's Day, the cavalry one, is my favorite one. I know, but I can't do the 1930s. By the way, do you see the questions as they scroll? I don't think you do. Anyway, someone said to do an entire show in my 1930s radio voice. But the problem there is that I'm normally doing it stream of consciousness and as an improvisation. But I couldn't do that for 2 hours.
That's on the 110 southbound side at the 101.
Yeah, it has to be the right context, though. For me to use a 30s radio voice, like thousands of gay refugees in Holland are being told to prove they're gay. But they're not gay. Ricola.
Need a car wash? Download Mobile Wash. Mobile Wash brings the car wash to you. Why Mobile Wash? Because your time matters. Enjoy the convenience of a car
No, I'm going to talk about Jaeger.
wash in minutes. Download Mobile Wash now. Your car wash app. Use promo radio.
No, they're not. No, the Bourne movies are pure fiction. And of course, the bad guy always turns out to be the CIA. Say what?
We're back at 2015.
Oh, yeah.
An amazing team at LDI can offer you. The technology and 35-year proven track record at LDI cannot be beat. But tightening loose skin is only the beginning. If you're tired of looking at deep wrinkles or lines around your mouth and lip area, call LDI. If you want to treat undamaged skin on your face or in your chest, how about removing those red and brown spots? Call LDI. Or if you or your child is struggling.
Yeah, Jane Wells and I are really good friends. We've talked about that we want to fill in for John and Ken someday. That would be fun. She's funny. And her husband's a really good dude. Her husband was a career naval aviator. And her son is a Marine officer. Tarantino big time.
How much is the house call?
Are you a residential homeowner? Yes. Does your hot water heater have a tank? Or is a tank
Tarantino's big mistake, by the way,
call is free during normal
is that he gets obsessed with a lot of really beautiful LA
Then by all means, send a smell good phone.
TV news people.
And thank you for being a real person. I keep getting Papa's answering machine over at Stinky's Rooter.
We're live 24
And that's all I can say.
Smell Good Plumber will be there shortly. I'm Mike Diamond, and I guarantee my plumbers will show up on time and smell good. Or you'll
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that dickhead, fuck himself, Canadian asshole.
Living on an adjustable bed. And thanks to the affordable selection at Revive by Living Spaces, you can. Starting at just $4.95, our power adjustable bases are designed with a variety of smart features that provide the best in
I mean, you go hiking in Afghanistan with your 7-month pregnant
queen mattress and power adjustable
wife.
base for just $7.95. Only at Revive by
You know, what a total asshat.
Hey, it's Sharon Bellio. I love this time of year. Nothing's better than lying in bed on a cool, crisp autumn night and drifting off to a quiet, restful night's sleep. But if you or your loved one has sleep apnea, the sounds of snoring may be echoing throughout the whole house. CPAP is typically used as the first line of treatment for sleep apnea, but studies show up to 50% of people who have a CPAP machine.
How much time?
Now, there's a silent mask tree treatment.
You got a minute and 40.
Okay.
From Southern California. It's called Inspire. Inspire is an implantable device that works inside your body with your natural breathing process. It delivers mild stimulation to keep your airway open, giving you and your partner the restful sleep you need. Inspire is FDA approved and currently offered at more than 100 leading medical centers across the country. Visit
We are the worst bandies to try and have a prisoner exchange with.
safety information and find a doctor who can help determine if Inspire is right for you. The freedom to sleep like everyone else is just a click away.
You got 1 minute?
That's inspiresleep.com.
Thinking about life insurance? What if you could make one free phone call and learn your best price from nearly a dozen highly rated, price competitive companies? Well, that's exactly what happens when you call SelectQuote Life. For example, George is 40.
Well, right. We don't have any
From other companies.
paid programming on KFI. That's why KFI is so different from other AM stations in the country, except for Rice Delman. And then who's the dude? Who's Money Matters on Sunday? So those two guys,
For life insurance,
and they pay an assload of money. I mean, I don't blame them. I don't blame KFI for taking that money.
is it ready?
Yeah.
800-723-5330 or go to selectquote.com.
And then leave it up. I'm gonna use a PC.
All right, then. Full details on the example policy, selectquote.com/commercials.
Life will throw you trials on its up. There's no need for you to invite the devil to dinner. I'll explain what that means when this week's Jesus Christ Show.
Tomorrow morning at 6 on KFI AM 640.
Stimulating talk.
It's the Marquettes with Out of Limits. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is The Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here. Live until midnight. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dark Secret Place, one word. And if you're really nice, you can suggest a bumper. So, but this one was mine. The Marquettes with Out of Limits from 1962. All right, so perhaps you know the Ventures version. This was the original. So the Canadian hostages. We'll get back to Kurdistan here in just a second, but I have this thing up, and I don't want the video to screw up. But a U.S.-Canadian couple freed in Pakistan earlier this week, nearly 5 years after being abducted in Afghanistan, returned to Canada yesterday, where the husband said one of his children had been murdered and his wife had been repeatedly raped. American Caitlin Coleman and her Canadian husband Joshua Boyle were kidnapped while backpacking in Afghanistan in 2012 by the Taliban allies, the Haqqani network. This would be his 7 months pregnant wife. 7 months pregnant. First of all, to get on a plane for 16 hours, and then secondly, hey, you know what? Let's do some hiking. And since there's nowhere to hike in Canada, let's go to Afghanistan. But this is a part of the statement that they made.
No point explaining to them that we are the worst bandies to try and have a prisoner exchange with. They really will not settle this until they get what they're demanding. So I can only ask that you please quickly try to resolve this for our sake.
This was their first video when they were captured. And the guy's prior marriage was to a Canadian who was held at Gitmo named Omar Kadir, this 14-year-old. That broke up, and then he marries this American woman. They get kidnapped in 2012 because they're hiking in Afghanistan, and she's 7 months pregnant.
Reprisals on our family. That's us and grandchildren. If the policies of the Afghan government are not overturned, either by the Afghan government or by Canada somehow, or the United States.
Good luck, Canada, right? So the Pakistanis are claiming that it was through informers that they found them and the whole thing.
Pakistani government's cooperation is a sign that it is honoring America's wish that it do more to provide security in the region. And I want to thank the Pakistani government. I want to thank Pakistan. I believe they're starting to respect the United States again. You know, a lot of countries are starting to respect the United States.
It is really hard to find less sympathetic hostages than this guy. And then, by the way, they were freed by the Pakistani military. The United States sent a C-17 to Islamabad to pick them up and fly them to Germany. He refused to get on the plane. He refused to let his family get on the plane because he suspected that it was a ruse and it was going to wind up in Gitmo or something. I don't know what's in this guy's head. I mean, again, this is a guy who took his 7-month pregnant wife hiking in Afghanistan. So 5 years later, they're liberated, and he doesn't want to get on a U.S. Air Force C-17. So I don't know what to think. But yeah, so what they're saying is that one of the children, they had 3 children in captivity. They had a daughter and 2 sons, and that the daughter was somehow killed by the Haqqani network. The details are a little sketchy. But anyway, Joshua Boyle told reporters in Toronto yesterday, quote, "Obviously, it will be of incredible importance to my family that we are able to build a secure sanctuary for our 3 surviving children to call a home. The stupidity and the evil of the Haqqani network in the kidnapping of a pilgrim was eclipsed only by the stupidity and evil of authorizing the murder of my infant daughter," Boyle said, reading from a statement in a calm voice. "And the stupidity and evil of the subsequent rape of my wife, not as a lone action, but by one guard, but assisted by the captain of the guard and supervised by the commandant." He did not elaborate on what he meant by pilgrim or on the murder or rape. Coleman was not at, the wife was not at the news conference. Boyle said that the Taliban, who he referred to by their official name, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, had carried out an investigation last year and conceded that the crimes against his family were perpetrated by the Haqqani network. He called on the Taliban to provide my family with the justice we are owed. God willing, this litany of stupidity will be the epitaph of the Haqqani network, he said at the press conference there in Toronto. He did not take questions from the reporters. The family traveled from Pakistan to London and then to Toronto. Boyle provided a written statement to the AP on one of their flights saying his family had unparalleled resilience and determination. So it's a mystery. I did not, and I would venture that most of you had not heard of this family, period. The Canadians haven't made a real big stink about it. And this is by design, by the way. This is something that over the course of the War on Terror, we've learned and implemented a much smarter policy. And that is, you don't sit there and have telethons and wear ribbons and honk your horn and flash your lights for 1 or 2 or 3 prisoners or hostages. You devalue them is what you do. You don't let the enemy know that there's an update on Nightline every single night about Bo Bergdahl or whatever. So that's part of the reason Bergdahl was treated as just a POW. We didn't have country concerts or tribute albums or crap like that, and it worked. It worked until it didn't. The Bergdahl deal was going to be a local deal with the release of some lower-level Taliban guys for Bergdahl until Eric Holder and the Department of Justice decided to get involved and get the FBI involved in hostage negotiation with an enemy in the field. It was a bizarre jumping of borders by the FBI, and that's when the Obama administration FBI stuck their finger in the pie. Suddenly it became 4 high-level Taliban prisoners in Gitmo being sent to Qatar, where they would live for a year, and then Bergdahl would be released. So it was stupid, and it was an own goal, as they say in soccer. It was shooting ourselves in the foot because we gave the Taliban an idea of the value of Bergdahl. Well, like with these people, as I say, I didn't even know they were. I remember something when they were first taken, but I had forgotten it was 5 years ago. So in captivity, that she had 4 kids total in captivity. So the citizenship of the kids is probably not in question. They're going to be Canadians, the whole thing. But anyway, still a very it is hard to scare up sympathy for this couple, and I dare say that I think that might have been part of the reason for the policy, is that if this had been a top story 5 years ago, man takes American wife 7 months pregnant hiking in Afghanistan, there would have been. I mean, all I can say, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I said, can you imagine having to write the letter home if American soldiers had liberated this family and one soldier had died? Can you imagine writing that letter home to the family about your father, son, husband died liberating this particular family that was there almost by choice? So that was voluntarily walking around Afghanistan. So anyway, all right. When we come back, what is the latest in Kurdistan, and what interest does Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey have in common with Moscow in creating this line in the sand? You could say, "Oops, I spilled water." That all coming up. It is a Dark Secret Place here Saturday night. Brian Suits in here live until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news. I didn't really spill water. It is true, though. Handel spills Diet Coke all the time here. Oh, not the worst. I've seen it worse. All done. Yeah, I think this is going to be the device that I'm going to use.
There is one team here. There can be no difference of opinions on us. We are going to
Instead of my LG phone.
see the people are served.
Feinstein says that the speed of the fire is one of the main concerns because firefighters are struggling to get in front of it. There are about 10,000 firefighters on the lines tonight. Seniors are getting more COLA.
A cost of living adjustment. Social Security recipients, disabled veterans, and federal retirees will see a 2% jump in benefits next year, the largest increase since 2012. That's about $25 a month on average. Automatic annual increases for Social Security have been in effect since 1975. The New York Post reports over the past 8 years, the annual COLA has averaged
Yeah, Kennedy and I talk about that all the time. We loved to work with Kennedy. I'm on Kennedy Thursday on Fox Business.
Puerto Rico, our fellow citizens, we are all in this with each other for the long
Yeah, they stripped. Last Saturday they were painting, and they never put the acoustic things back up. Does anyone listen to my podcast? Did you hear my interaction with the snake on Thursday?
at the 110 southbound side at Century Boulevard. Crash there, still blocking the left lane. Truck's going to be jammed all the way back to Exposition Boulevard northbound side of slope.
I was recording my podcast,
Atwater
and
5 south is still looking a little sluggish from the 2
and
northbound side of
I walked onto a Mojave Green who alerted me and said, "Get the hell away." And luckily, my dog Lucy learned the hard way what that means, and so she backed off because she got hit in the face last year. The podcast is at connectpal.com. It is the Dark Secret Place.
You need the smartest people on your side. Warriors with an unwavering passion to heal. Researchers who are tirelessly to make breakthrough discoveries. World-renowned physicians with unmatched expertise. A team who understands your needs and will fight for you. See how we've helped others patient stories and share yours. Visit kentmedicine.org/tech effect to make an appointment. Call 800-USC-CARE. Kent Medicine of USC, beyond exceptional medicine. Everyone does it. In the living room, the garage, at the kitchen table. Everyone you know. Your kid's teacher, the neighbor, the coffee guy. Hey, you're doing it right now. I'm talking about listening to radio. Radio is huge. Radio ads like this connect to 93% of Americans a week. That's bigger than TV, Facebook, and Google. So if you're a marketer with radio, you reach more of who you want. More boomers, more Gen Xers, even more millennials. So get to iHeartMedia.com for the one place everyone is. KMFM Radio.
Yeah, they Mojave Greens are not the nicest snake. No, what about Oliver Stone? I love Oliver Stone. What about him? He's a total lech, too. Really? You mean like an old accusation or a new one? December 13th for the Leno's Garage episode that I'm in.
Hi, I believe if you've been dreaming about a kitchen remodel, this may be the perfect time. For over 50 years, the kitchen store has been a well.
I say near daily, by the way.
We're back at 3524.
Okay.
All of their cabinets are on sale and at all price levels. The kitchen store will redesign your entire kitchen for these new cabinets, and you'll have your very own design.
Oh.
Smart, creative,
Yeah, there was a Playmate of the Month who Oliver Stone put his hands all over her on a flight
not only that,
in front of witnesses, and he had to, she had to move. So he was drunk. There's a famous executive who worked at a large sports-oriented cable network who masturbated on a plane next to Aaron Andrews, the ABC sideline reporter.
California, the risk for earthquake damage is real. So is the benefit of earthquake insurance. Get the strength to rebuild. Contact your home insurance company or learn more at earthquakeauthority.com.
Security.
All right, I'm good. Hey, 198 people streaming. How you doing? How you doing, everybody?
It's the third annual birthday bash. Casino Resort and Spa. Saturday, October 21st, 6 to 9 p.m. at 5 Nightclub. Come hang with me and the whole crew. Live band, magician, food from tacos to tequila, and prizes. There's limited space, so don't miss out. To sign up, go to KMI. Keyword Morongo or Conway birthday. See you, Morongo. KMI.
An iHeart radio station.
Yes, this is a live stream of the Dark Secret Place. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. And so back to what's going on in Kurdistan, which is a notional country. It's not officially a country, but we're generally referring to northern Iraq as Kurdistan. And this is where, just to back you up, just 2 weeks, we're not going to go the full 100 years, but the Kurds held a non-binding referendum in regards to should we be independent of Iraq or not, and it won 93-7. I mean, it was overwhelming, and it's thought that the 7% that said no were the minority Arabs and Turkmen that live very much up in Kurdistan. And so the Baghdad government said, don't hold that vote. The U.S., in fact, the American ambassador and the American ambassador for counterterrorism, Brett McGurk, said, this is not really the time for that. We don't need a distraction like that. Maybe don't do that. Well, the Kurds did it anyway. The Turks said don't do it. The Iranians said don't do it. The more people lined up and said don't have this referendum, the more likely it was that the Kurds were going to have it. So they had it. And again, it's non-binding. but it was 93%. So clearly the will of the Kurdish people is to break away from Iraq. It's also to break away from Turkey and break away from Syria and break away from Iran. But a new nation where the Kurds have majority is in eastern Turkey, eastern Syria, northern Iraq, and western Iran. There is no way that those countries are going to just give up that land, especially the Iraqis, because this is where nearly 50% of their oil is. And the Iraqis are saying, there's no friggin' way you're going to walk away with half of our oil. Why don't we just calm down and negotiate this? And the Iraqi way of saying, why don't we calm down and talk about this, is sending the army. And so the northern part of Iraq has been largely autonomous since the end of the first Gulf War. The Kurds have their own provincial police. There is an Iraqi federal police presence there, but it's nowhere near like it is in southern Iraq and in the rest of Iraq. And for God's sake, the Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, guards the Iraqi parliament. The Iraqis respect these guys, their fighting ability, the whole thing. But they just don't want to talk about creating a country called Kurdistan. And you can understand why, because oil is the income. That's the revenue stream. And for basically, for 20% of the country to take 50% of the oil, that's what the Iraqis are having a problem with. And so the demographics, for instance, of Kirkuk is that it is Turkmen, it's Arab, and then there is about a 1/3 Kurdish population there. It's not the most dense Kurdish town. But the Iraqi army rolled in there earlier tonight with M1 tanks, the Iraqi counterterrorism police, who are very good, who have been leading the way in Mosul and these other fights against ISIS. Those are Iraqi police, not the army. The Iraqi counterterror police are the ones who are responsible really for taking Mosul. So they know what they're doing, and they're battle hardened. I mean, it pains me it takes a lot for me to describe an Iraqi army unit as competent and battle hardened. But I know guys who were embedded with them, and they said, yeah, this is not 2004. This is not 2005. These guys, with an existential threat to their country, they sat up and finally took responsibility for defending their own country. And so they're very good. And so they're not going to surrender the city of Kirkuk, which is a city of about 500,000. The primary Kurdish town, the capital of what you would call Kurdistan, is Erbil. And this is where, right when you think, well, it's getting too complex for me because we're talking about Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, and then this fictional country called Kurdistan. Well, it gets even better because within the Kurdish population, there are significant political differences. Significant. I mean, like Republican, Democrat. They are the Kurds, and their military are called the Peshmerga. But the deal is, there are every political party has its own Peshmerga, and the KDP, the Kurdish Democratic Party, and the PUK have their own Peshmerga, and they have different levels of effectiveness and trustworthiness and the whole thing. So it's not like there's a united front up there, unless, of course, somebody shoots somebody, which there's no guarantee that's not going to happen. So effectively, while the United States is still playing Let's Bomb ISIS, even though that game ended about maybe 5 months ago, Moscow, Iran, Syria, and Iraq are playing Let's Be the Shia Curtain. And so the Shia Muslims, the Persian Shia Muslims of Iran, now with the overwhelmingly Shia government in Iraq, and then the Alawite and Shia government in Syria, are now a wall. They're now one thing. They're a subdivision of Iran Incorporated. And Iran Incorporated is rapidly becoming a subdivision of Moscow Incorporated. The Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Secretary or Minister of Defense went to Moscow last week, and they cut some deals here, cut some deals there. They're also scared because Moscow just inked a pretty big defense deal with Saudi Arabia, and Tehran doesn't like that. They don't like Putin playing both sides, which is exactly what Putin wants to do. That would be his method of managing the Middle East, would be to arm the Sunnis and arm the Shias and then get out of the way and say, hold my vodka. That he really has no interest in being anyone's buddy or rebuilding Syria, but you'll see that Russian contractors are going to be the ones to rebuild Syria. But that's his end game, is to, and when the dust settles, have the Iraqis thank the Americans, kick us out of Iraq. Iranians remain in Iraq. Iranian military and the Revolutionary Guard remain in Iraq and remain in Syria. And so there's effectively one Shia Alawite country. Now, the United States, President Trump announced on Wednesday, that the significant new sanctions have been put in place against the Iranian the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. And the IRGC, the best analogy would be the SS. The IRGC are the armed branch of the Iranian government. The Iranian army is a draftee army. Everyone has to serve 2 years. They get minimal training, minimal gear, and all that. But the IRGC gets the good gear, the good pay, and the good people, and they do the most. They own factories, they make their own money, and they are the primary exporters of terror. The IRGC are the guys in 2004 and 5 who began sending a far more deadly form of IED, roadside bomb, into Iraq to kill Americans. The IRGC are responsible for the death of probably about 2,000 Americans in Iraq. Because in 2004, we started seeing the roadside bombs go from recovered mortar shells to purpose-built explosive formed penetrator bombs, very, very sophisticated but easily made roadside bombs. Those were literally made in Iran. They didn't teach people how to make them and then send them back to Iraq. They were manufactured by the IRGC in Iran. Why we did not shut down every single bank account they have around the world at the time, I don't know. But now we're trying to do that. Problem is, the Iranians have, a 40-year head start on us since 1980. The Iranians are extraordinarily good at hiding a business behind a business behind a business behind a business behind Glendale. Okay, they have significant interest in the LA area. They have American citizens who are ethnically Persian, who help supply them with critical technologies and things like that. They're very, very good at that, extremely good. They're better than we are at blocking them. But we should have done it in 2005, but we didn't. It's, better late than never. But it's a significant deal. The Iranians make a lot of money in America and in Europe. And so it's significant to finally name them as a terrorist group. All right, we'll be back in just a minute. A private mercenary army was really going to invade Qatar. The return of Blackwater under a different name when we come back. It's the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
Dodgers have taken game 1 of their series with the Chicago
Okay.
Cubs in the National League Championship. Dodgers flying Cubs 2 tonight. Game 2 of the series is tomorrow afternoon at Dodger Stadium at about 4:30. Authorities in communities burned in a series of wildfires in Northern California said they are trying to solve about 250 missing persons reports. Officials say they do not expect the death toll to rise to that number. 40 people have been confirmed killed in the fires. Police say a man that threatened his neighbor and stabbed the neighbor's dog gave up after an 8.5-hour standoff after he barricaded himself inside his North Hollywood apartment. He's to be charged with making criminal threats and animal cruelty. Check out your
The Iraqi dinar,
A facelift or neck
I wouldn't hold my breath. You're not sending your kids to college on Iraqi dinars.
face, eyes, and
I did that too, by the way. I bought I bought $1,000 of dinars for $1 million. But,
The technology and 30 track record at LDI cannot be beat.
it's not gonna
It is only the beginning. If you're tired
go up in value. They'll probably revalue them anyway, and they might reissue new bills. So you might be fucked. If you can't mail yours back and change them out for new bills, you might be screwed.
LDI,
Oh, I hate Joe Satriani.
struggling with acne or ulcerative
Um,
scars and just can't figure out a lasting solution, LDI can.
Well,
Once and for all.
Eric Prince and Academy have a huge training facility in the Emirates. You can't fly over it. You can't fly a drone over it. You can't get within 10 miles of it if you're driving around the Emirates.
800 666
Um,
6000. That's 1-800
he trained
6000 or go to get
specifically about 15,000 Africans and Filipinos there to be like a army, a foreign legion on standby. Pardon me. So
The 110 southbound side at Century Boulevard. Still got a crash there, blocking the left lane. Traffic's going to be jammed before you back to Exposition.
so there.
Northbound side is slow from Exposition Boulevard up to the 101. Mid-City, 10 East is slow from Crenshaw Boulevard to Street.
You're seeing what? What are you seeing?
Detailing at home or work in minutes. Download Mobile Wash now. Your car wash app. Use promo radio and save.
Are you a perfectionist? Are you a perfectionist? This is
Obviously, I can only imply, and you have to infer. I just strung some sentences together. That's what I did. But no, it is such a badly kept secret in Hollywood, especially TV, the TV side, and also here in radio. There's some total dirtbags in radio, and some of them are right here in LA.
You'll know it too, and it doesn't frighten you a bit. My guys go
But yeah, the guys, the gatekeepers for movies are just amazing
installation is perfect.
dirtbags. It's amazing.
An air conditioner will perform for twice as many years. Gettle is the home of excellent technicians.
Yeah, there's like a there's like a green flash or something. What I might do is I might reset the stream for hour 2 at the top of the hour. I don't know.
Right counsel to get you access to the top attorneys with nothing out of pocket. See how much more we can recover for you at rightcounsel.com.
Maybe it's a pair of shoes, maybe it's a certain bike, maybe it's a certain mattress. Whether you're running, biking, or even sleeping, the equipment you use matters. Beauty-Rest provides equipment for high performance.
So you're saying don't fuck with it if it's not a problem?
It is. You're ready? We have 1 minute.
Yep.
During Beauty-Rest high performance sleep sale. Find a retailer at beautyrestauretailers.com.
I will always do the immigrant song for a bumper.
Serta, America's #1 mattress manufacturer. Discover Serta's all-new mattress collections. Experience our latest iComfort numbering system that helps comfortably cool and support every curve of your body. Or put your sleep problems to rest with the newly redesigned
I will look into Baby It's You.
participating retailers. Find a local retailer at retailers.com.
But we have to play one more Ultra Lounge.
Interrupting the music over and over. We thought maybe we can do it better than Pandora with our iHeartRadio app. And now we have. Open iHeartRadio, type in an artist you love, and let iHeartRadio build you a station with all that artist's best music and songs handpicked to make you a perfect station. And with iHeartRadio, you get more music, fewer interruptions, and it's free. Try it today. All your favorite music, all your favorite stations, all free.
Life will throw you trials on this up. There's no need for you to invite the devil to dinner. I'll explain what that means for this week's
I love OMD.
Jesus Christ Show.
Enola Gay.
On KFI AM 640.
More stimulating talk.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight and live streaming at unsheepyourself.com. And you can get on, you can join the live stream and ask me questions. And we are answering them during the commercial breaks and stuff. All right, clumsy French spy sends text message to the radical Islamist he was keeping tabs on. A member of the French intelligence services. The French have two. They have an internal and external intelligence service. They have the Directeur Général Sécurité Étrangère, the General Directorate for External Security, and then the DGSI with the radical Islamic imams and et cetera. And so they go undercover. They worship in the mosques, you know, the whole thing. And so this guy happened to have an imam's number, directly have this guy's number. So here's what happened. A member of the French intelligence services has landed himself in hot water after sending a text message containing information on a radical Islamist he was spying on to the target himself. Anyone who has accidentally sent a text message to the wrong person might have some sympathy with a member of the French intelligence service who landed himself in trouble with the bosses. The man who worked for the Central Territorial Intelligence Service, the SCRAT, the SCRT, had been keeping tabs on a suspected Islamic extremist. He wanted to send a text containing important intelligence to a colleague, but oops, he had the wrong number selected. The spy got all his phone numbers mixed up and accidentally sent it to the very suspect he had been closely monitoring. The target was reportedly quick to respond to the message, reminding the spy of how incompetent he had been. And to make matters worse, he was able to warn those he had been in contact with that they too were probably being listened to. The gaffe has angered those at France's main internal intelligence service, the DGSI. And what the guy evidently was doing was he was trying to send the contact info to a colleague. And so he was on the target's, contact page in his phone. And he, like in my phone, you go down to share contact and you press share contact. But evidently this guy didn't do that. He was like copying and pasting the number. So anyway, he scrolls back, thinks he's texting his buddy. He's actually texting the target and sends the target his own number and says, this is Mr. Green or, whatever. So the imam knows immediately what's going on. And bust them. There have been some really, really, really boneheaded things. There was an American communications officer once who accidentally emailed a list of an American spy network in Iran. And these guys were all rapidly rolled up and killed. And it was because he sent the email to the wrong guy who was part of their targeting. The guy gets the email in English with an American.gov return email address. He gives it to the Iranian intelligence. They know exactly what they're looking at. And within days, this spy network that took years to put in place in Iran was rolled up. So don't laugh. Don't sit there thinking that we don't make mistakes like that and that the silly French did it that one time. Staying in Europe, by the way, a German member of parliament, the Bundestag, is a minister in Angela Merkel's government, is not the German of the week so far. This would be the German Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, who suggested that there's so many Muslims in Germany that maybe there should be an official annual Muslim holiday in Germany. And immediately, pardon me, that's why they call it the cough button. Immediately, some of the opposition parties, who, by the way, had their chance last month to upset Angela Merkel, but they didn't do it. But they went bananas. The Christians, the Social Christian Union, the Bavaria-based sister party of Merkel's party, the Christian Democrats, strongly and instantly rejected the idea. They said, quote, "Germany's Christian heritage is not negotiable. For us, the introduction of Muslim holidays is out of the question," close quote. The Interior Minister had initially said, he said, quote, "Where there are so many Muslims, why shouldn't we consider a Muslim holiday?" Close quote. And by the way, there's no law that prevents a Muslim from celebrating Ramadan or Eid or anything. It's just that the Germans don't want an official holiday for Islam. They don't want an official holiday for Buddhism. They don't want an official holiday for Druids because Germany is a Christian country. And so anyway, that idea fell like a thud at that point. And then the ever-tolerant Dutch, by the way, the Dutch who will take absolutely anybody, of course, and the evil Americans are closing down their borders and the whole thing. Well, a lot of refugees from wherever have discovered that the magic phrase that pays in Holland, if you don't want to be deported back to Iraq, back to Turkey, back to whatever, all you have to do is say, "But I'm gay. I'm LGBTQ, etc." That's ROFL, LOL, LMAO. It's all you have to do is say, all right, maybe I'm not a political refugee, but I'm gay. I like the penis. And the Dutch immediately put you into a 3-year holding pattern, and they just assume, you're telling the truth, and they agree, yep, you're going to be killed if you're sent back to Turkey or whatever. Well, the Dutch, so many refugees have discovered this magic phrase that pays that they're all using it now. So now the Dutch are having to invent clever ways to have people prove they're gay. And they are, for instance, saying, well, bring your boyfriend next time. If you have a boyfriend, bring him. If you don't have a boyfriend, go get a boyfriend. And we want you guys to make out in front of us and stuff like that. More on this next hour. But it just shows you that yes, there are limits to everyone's tolerance, especially the Europeans who traditionally have really hard limits to how much they're willing to put up with. When we come back, Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, with his new mercenary army, is being accused of plotting to invade Qatar and overthrow the emir of Qatar. That and more. Hour number 2 of The Dark Secret Place rolls on right after this. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Well, I did. I was talking about the sanctions on the IRGC.
The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has been revoked by its board. That decision reached today.
No, I have a CAB. I have a combat action badge. Because I was officially a 13 series artillery officer when I was in my infantry company. So I have a CAB, a combat action badge, not a combat infantryman's badge. Or as we call it, the cock and balls. Because it's a bayonet with a grenade. And so we call it the cock and balls. I was a Cav Scout. I was a medic with a scout platoon in the first Gulf War in 2nd Squadron, 2nd ACR. Then I went to scout school in 92. So I was a 19 Delta from 92 to 2001 when I got commissioned. 2002, when I went to OCS in 2002. And then went to Field Artillery Officer Guard. Washington Guard, Nevada Guard, Oregon Guard, Washington Guard. I was in 221 Armor in Nevada at Fallon, 82nd Cav in Oregon, 41st Infantry, and then 303rd Cavalry up in Washington, where I was XO. I was in the tow platoon, Echo Company, 4th of the 160th, up on Valhalla, right by Fry's, up Hollywood Way. Fort Sill sucks, gigantic goat balls. Yeah, I was a 50th General Hospital. I was a medic and a lab tech. When we got to the Gulf, when we got to Saudi Arabia, they took all the 91 Bravos, all the medics, and they kicked us out to 7th Corps, and that's how I wound up in 2nd ACR. I did not like the medical corps. The medical corps was too much like MASH. I don't have a concealed carry permit in LA County. I do not. Yeah, my Snow County, my first one was Rick Bart, signed by Sheriff Bart, and then the guy that took over. I could get one in LA County because I do get threats, and that's all I would need. But if I did, I have a Springfield XDS 45, which is a terrific carry pistol. Yeah, I might go to Kern County. Actually, they're super easy. No, California does not do reciprocity. Do not. Fuck California. Yeah, the nine is fine, but if I just like the 45. I just when a bullet goes in somebody, I want it to mean something. So, yeah, it's the real. It's less than an inch wide, and the barrel's 3 inches. Yeah. Oh, I just get wacky letters, you know. I just get, various nutbags
Remind me of Mr. Green Jeans.
emailing me. And that's all you have to do is show a threat. Except it takes a little more than that, though. In LA County, Sheriff McConnell is no different than Lee Baca, who you basically have to contribute a big bunch of money to his re-election campaign and shit like that. The Hornady red tip, Hornady hollow points, the red tip. I don't know. The Springfield, the XDS is not approved. I can bring it in from Washington. You can't buy one here in California. I would say any of the Smith & Wesson M&Ps, except now, Hornady critical defense. The M&Ps, but you can't get those in California either. It's stupid, really fucking stupid. KFI, AM 641 Stimulating Talk. It is a Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight. And if you are watching on the live stream, then you are detecting that the studio is a little bare, like it was last week. And here I'll turn the camera around as I describe to you, the radio audience not watching on YouTube. If you go to unsheepyourself.com, you can live stream it. We took down the acoustic tiles that say KFI on them, and then I let a guy in last week at 11 while I was still on the air, and he started painting. And it's got to dry, and I guess we're going to put these acoustic tiles back up or something. But in the meantime, it sounds kind of like I'm in a room with bare walls, oddly enough. So there is that. So Blackwater, perhaps you've heard of them. Started in North Carolina by a former U.S. Navy SEAL, Eric Prince. A wealthy guy. Family was very wealthy. He took over the money. If you don't know this, his older sister is Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education. After the Baghdad massacre kerfuffle, when a Blackwater convoy that was guarding U.S. diplomats in Baghdad, in western Baghdad, lit up a bunch of Iraqis, innocent Iraqis, because someone thought they were under attack and someone else just started shooting everybody. Blackwater effectively ceased to exist at that point. And it was reformed. Not only was it the first iteration was Z, letter X, letter E. And then Eric Prince found an even better answer, and it was to just leave the United States and go find a very, very friendly country that understands how to keep a secret and shut the hell up and appreciate him. So Eric Prince and his inner staff lift up, the tent pegs and roll up the tent, and they unfurl it in the United Arab Emirates. And the Emirates is a very Western-friendly set of countries, and independent Emirates altogether is the UAE. And they like Mr. Prince and what he offered to them. What he offered to them was, I can put on the ground here in your country basically a private army that will be better trained, better led, and better equipped than probably most of the armies in the Middle East. It just said it won't be very big. It'll be about 15,000 guys. And we will not bother you. We will not threaten to overthrow you or anything like that. But I need a partner that will help me maintain privacy and keep prying eyes away. And so there's a compound in the Emirates, and you can't fly over it. You can't fly a drone over it. You can't approach it within a mile because Emirati security, as well as the company, which is now called Academy. It's Academy with an I, not with a Y. And what they have in there are everything from training grounds and ranges and barracks and things like that. They recruit in Asia and in Africa. There was a South African company called Omega Group, and we had them in Iraq. They were Afrikaner supervisors, former South African army guys, big white guys, and then the troops were actually from Lesotho. They were Zulus. who were always very tight with the Afrikaners. I mean, after they were done fighting each other, and they were a very good group. They were well trained, well disciplined, et cetera. And so the Iraq business dried up for them, and so Erik Prince has recruited very effectively in Africa, very selectively, also in the Philippines and in Indonesia, and anywhere young men are willing to go and work for peanuts and carry a gun. And so it's a hard life. They're drilled pretty hard and everything, but what they've come out with is effectively a private foreign legion for the Emirates. So this is the reason I'm giving you this backstory. It's because according to a Qatari official, when the big Saudi-Qatar kerfuffle kicked off about 4 months ago, there was a plan between Bahrain, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. There was a plan, according to a Qatari official, to use Erik Prince's private army to overthrow the Emir of Qatar. Now keep in mind that the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters is in Bahrain, and CENTCOM's headquarters is in Qatar. There is the Al Udeid air base in Qatar. We have at, pardon me, cough button. We have at any one time usually about 10,000 American troops, Air Force, Navy, Marines on the ground there at the CENTCOM forward headquarters. And so it's not an accompanied tour. You don't go there with your wife and kids. It's just service members. They live on base. They don't really get a whole lot of freedom to go out and, wear shorts and hang out at the Hard Rock Cafe and all that. So it's conceivable that a coup could happen and the Americans would just stand by and not have a piece of it. But anyway, this is the story. Qatar's former deputy prime minister accused the United Arab Emirates of plotting to invade Qatar with an army of mercenaries. According to a report, Abdullah bin Hamad Al Attiyah leveled the charges on Wednesday in a report published by the Spanish daily ABC. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed a blockade and economic sanctions on Qatar in June. They accused Qatar of supporting extremism and being too close to Iran. Not only are they sort of weirdly tight with Iran, but the Qatari royal family and the nation of Qatar were some of the most strident early supporters of ISIS in Syria. They wanted to see, they wanted a caliphate to succeed. So the Qatari official said the plan, which was prepared ahead of the diplomatic spat, was never carried out because U.S. President Donald Trump failed to green light the assault. An unidentified official source told the Daily that the soldiers for hire were trained at an Emirati military base in the west of the country by Academy, the U.S. security service company formerly known as Blackwater. Blackwater military contractors killed 17 unarmed Iraqi civilians in 2007, and that's what prompted the firm to change its name. So this is what they said. Quote, we estimate that Blackwater, they're still using the old name, trained about 15,000 employees, most of them Colombian and South American. The New York Times reported as far back as 2011 that Colombians were entering the UAE posing as construction workers to become part of the secret mercenary army being built by Blackwater. The Emiratis, the country of the UAE, kicked in $500 million to establish the private army there. So it's a serious investment. So anyway, they are sitting there, and you can't go and hire them. They basically do jobs that are approved of by the Emirates. So it's, you know what, the credibility of this report, I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. I'm saying if you're the Emirates and you want the Emir of Qatar overthrown and you don't want the Americans and CENTCOM to leave, but you want a more friendly regime there that's not assisting the Iranians, then no harm, no foul. Send an army of mercenaries into Qatar. And you know what else you do when you overthrow the Emir? You take Al Jazeera off the air. It's like the first thing you do is you bomb Al Jazeera so nobody's covering your coup. Al Jazeera is just sitting there in Qatar, criticizing everybody in the world but Qatar. So I would give the report credibility, because why couldn't it be true? There's no reason it could not be true. It's in the Emirates' interest. All right. When we come back, what does it take to stay as a refugee in Holland once you've already declared that you can't go back to Turkey, Iran, Iraq, or whatever because you're gay? That and the latest iteration of the venerable tank, the M1 tank, is still chugging along. with sexy new kit. And it is the 70th anniversary of this one thing that happened over Edwards Air Force Base, so it wasn't called that at the time. We'll talk about that. And something else is 53 years old today, and it's still chugging along in the U.S. military. That and more coming up. Dark Secret Place, Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chapay with the news.
Brown, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris have seen the devastation firsthand of the wildfires burning in Northern California. Brown says people still need to be on the alert as the fires continue to burn. The big fire burning in the Anaheim Hills area, 75% contained, more than 9,000 acres of burning. Homes, other buildings have been destroyed. Harvey Weinstein's been kicked out of the area of motion picture
I have to go get something to drink, like juice or something.
move comes after a growing sex harassment scandal that includes allegations Weinstein assaulted women. Check out your forecast.
Backyard's Thanks, man. I was planning on adding a deck too. Know any good contractors?
Why don't you just ask HomeAdvisor? What? HomeAdvisor.com. You just tell them about your project and they match you with local pros that can do the job.
Nice. Now, how much does it cost?
HomeAdvisor is totally free to use. Plus, you can read customer reviews, check pricing, book appointments for free.
What's the website again?
HomeAdvisor.com. Or just download the free HomeAdvisor app.
Hey, Ron here, professional crook. A lot of people have been talking lately about the sharing economy. I'm not into the stealing economy. Like your business buys stuff, I take it, I sell it, pure profit. You probably call this a crime. I call it income redistribution. Schedule your free security review today at bayalarm.com. Bay Alarm. What have you got to lose?
ECO 28, CCO 88, or 138.
Close tonight, right around 60. High and sunny tomorrow. Highs at the beaches into the 80s, near 90 inland, mid-90s possible for the Inland Empire. Traffic from your helpful SoCal Honda Traffic Center crashed in West LA on the 405.
That's going to be on the 405 northbound side at Santa Monica Boulevard. A crash there is blocking the left lane. Traffic's going to be slow back to National Boulevard. If you're traveling through Mid-City, the 10 East is looking a little sluggish from Vermont Avenue over to Alameda Street. Silver Lake is looking slow. 101 southbound side is slow from Silver Lake Boulevard down to Alameda Street. Northbound side is going to be slow from Alameda up to Echo Park Avenue. And in South LA, still some problems there. 110 south at Century Boulevard. A crash blocking the left lane. Traffic's going to be slow back to Exposition Boulevard. 110 northbound side is also slow from the 10 up to the 101. KFI traffic is brought to you by Mobile Wash. KFI in the sky helps get you there faster. I'm David Penson.
Need a car wash? Download Mobile Wash. Mobile Wash brings the car wash to you. Why Mobile Wash? Because your time matters. Convenience of a car wash and detailing at home or work in minutes. Download
I went with Vitamin Water Zero.
Car Wash app.
By the way, nothing
Bet you didn't know this.
takes the sting out of a cougar loss like a husky loss.
TV. Yeah, AM, FM radio. The radio that's free in your car, your kitchen, your office. Broadcast radio reaches more adults, teens, and millennials. More of everyone. More shoppers. Broadcast radio.
Like 20.
Yeah.
Every week. That's bigger than TV, Facebook, and If you're a marketer who needs to reach new fans, visit iHeartMedia.com. In one place, everyone is listening. AM, FM radio.
1-877 Cars for Kids. KARS Cars for Kids.
Donate your car today with 1-877 Cars for Kids. We're a recognized 501c3 charity organization, so you'll receive a maximum tax deduction. What's more, you'll receive a
No, B-52 is older than 53 years.
on the web at carsforkids.com.
1-877 Cars for Kids. Donate your car today.
Remember, that's cars with a K.
iHeartRadio does something no other app or website can do.
Oh, Cars for Kids?
Radio stations you can take anywhere. Want to listen to that station in Denver?
Where are you from? Where are you from in Magyar? Where are you from in Hungary?
iHeartRadio lets you create your own custom artist station. See the Sneaky Six from Motley Crue on iHeartRadio. Just type in the artist you love
I know Tazar and like Balaton
for you. Free
and Budapest.
music all in one
Oh, okay.
iHeartRadio.
Hey, remember the mortgage meltdown of 2008? Have you tried to get a mortgage since then and been turned down? Or maybe you haven't even tried because your credit score is stuck at 585. Or your
Yeah, I love Hungary.
write-offs. Well, Cash Call Mortgage has great news for you. We've just introduced programs for people who've been told no. And what's doubly exciting is that we can solve your mortgage problems with no
Yeah, I highly recommend if you're in if you're in Europe, you want to go to a really, really nice, friendly place. Hungary, down south at Tazar and Lake Balaton is great. Budapest is great.
and we'll work with you to solve your mortgage issues.
Or as we in the U.S. Army called it, Booty Fest. There was a tremendous amount of friendliness towards the American soldiers.
Are you an air conditioning technician? Are you
In Hungary.
Good, there's the new owner.
Yeah.
And I want you to come work for me. I recognize and appreciate and reward exceptional craftsmanship.
Hey, that ghetto guy's dad died, okay? And I don't buy air conditioning unless the guy's dad died.
Every ghetto installer is required to take 7 specific photos and text them to me after every installation. No matter where I am,
Kind of like I would never go to a psychologist unless she recommended laser dermatology and varicose vein replacement or removal.
know it too. And it doesn't frighten you a bit.
I don't even think you're any kind of a psychologist
I want you to be one of
unless you can recommend a good varicose vein removal thing.
the system receives annual maintenance.
Yeah, but look into Cars for Kids and see what that charity really is.
Ghetto is the home of
Go to Charity Watch
installations and
and
contractor license.
check it out.
GOE, TTL,
I think it's Cars for Kids with K's, right?
44 or ghetto. KFI AM 640.
An iHeart radio station.
24-hour news. More stimulating talk.
It wasn't the Coldplay song that you wanted of Speed of Sound, but it's the only one that I could find. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight. Wasn't Coldplay was at the Rose Bowl like 2 nights ago or something, wasn't it? I believe so. Just last week. We'll talk a little bit about the latest timeline from the Clark County Sheriff's Department in the Las Vegas shooting, that and more. And boy, what a great way to get conspiracy theories to go away than by continually changing your timeline. So that's going on. So you are a refugee in Holland. And I'm a political prisoner. It doesn't work. You're not given refugee status. They don't like my face. It doesn't work. So you hit on the evergreen, which is, but I'm gay. So this is the story. Zaman, a 26-year-old from Iraq, says he should be enjoying a new chapter in his life after suffering years of physical and verbal abuse from his family, his employers, and even random people on the street for being a gay. He finally made the decision to flee to the Netherlands, a country internationally lauded as one of the most gay-tolerant places in the world, LGBT. His trip to the Netherlands was not easy. He initially took a plane to Turkey, then traveled illegally to Greece by boat, and then you know the deal. He instead of being given refugee status, he's struggling to avoid deportation back to a place where his life would be in danger. Over the past 2 years, his asylum application has been denied twice because the Dutch don't believe his story, part of a growing trend affecting dozens of other LGBT refugees in the Netherlands. The Dutch, the IND, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, quote, the IND told me, we don't believe you're gay because you don't speak about it right. Zaman said by a FaceTime phone connection from his home in Middelburg, South Netherlands. According to Zaman, the Dutch authorities pointed to his lack of knowledge about the local Dutch gay scene. And they said they didn't believe he was in a relationship with Richard, who he had met a few months prior to his first interview with the IND in June of 2016. They didn't believe that he liked Dick at all, or Richard. And so the Dutch weren't buying it. Zaman appealed the decision. He compiled 150 photos and reams of WhatsApp conversations documenting his relationship with Dick, such as the couple enjoying Christmas at Richard's parents' house and celebrations, including birthdays and parties. He also included 12 letters from family and friends, and etc. So the Dutch have had it up to here with you and your claims of being gay, and this is something that they're doing. But here's the deal: if you in the United States, you know, what is that Gerard Depardieu movie where he marries what's her name? But this happens when you marry a foreigner, the ICE makes you sit down and prove you're married. I mean, it's the same thing that we do here in this country, and you can't just throw out a couple pictures, and you can't sit there and smooch in the office or whatever. They actually say, Andy McDowell, that's right, green card. Thank you very much, from James Kennedy, green card. And because there are people who arrange a marriage for a couple months, and then the foreigner gets American citizenship and they divorce. For instance, the San Bernardino shooters, remember that? There was that wacky friend of Omar Farouk, who was the front man, the beard for buying the AR-15s, and he married a woman on paper, and that the San Bernardino shooting unraveled everything. And so ICE takes this very seriously. You have to show, you know, and here's the thing: if you just met them overseas and you just are crazy kids, you want to get married, you have to make that case to them, because they know. And if you are unaware of this, by the way, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know why this is illegal, but if someone wants to pay you to marry them, and then get landed immigrant status, get a green card as a spouse, and then become a citizen, and then divorce you, I don't know why that's illegal. I'll be dead honest with you. I don't understand why you can't sell a kidney either, but you can't. In other countries you can, but in America you can't. But so anyway, this is illegal. And in Holland, because so many refugees have discovered that if they don't have a good enough case about why they're asking for refugee status, they play the gay card. So the Dutch have learned, well, if you're all gay, then what does this do? What are these beads on a string for? So, sorry, long cough button, very long. So, anyway, that's something that's happening in Holland, and the Germans are about to start doing this as well, because the German refugee policies are the most generous in all of Europe. The Germans have such a guilt complex about World War II that if you are granted refugee status in Germany, ding, it rings a bell, and you get like 3 years of subsidies and all that. Sorry about that. My lungs are filling up because my daughter gave me something. Believe it or not, I'm taking care of the cough. I didn't have a voice this morning, so it could be worse. All right, so anyway, that's what's happening in Holland. We'll get around to North Korea here after the bottom of the hour. Real quickly, the U.S. Army has announced what is probably going to be the final service life extension of the M1 Abrams. At least that's what they're saying. The problem is there's nothing to replace it. There's nothing on the horizon. The only plan is to continue adding things onto the M1 platform, up to and including probably upgunning the venerable tank that entered service in 1980. On September 20th, 2017, the U.S. Army announced that it would equip the M1A2 SEP V2 Abrams. That's the absolute newest version to come off the assembly line in Lima, Ohio. It will have the Israeli-built Trophy Active Protection System, or APS, or to put it in plain speech, some of America's 70-ton main battle tanks will now have a radar-guided robotic shotgun that can shoot down incoming missiles. What it does is, because tanks, and I got to tell you, the Russian army has seen this, the U.S. Army has seen this, and we're terrified. What we have seen in Syria over the past 5 years is the effectiveness of modern anti-tank missiles, because some of the newest Russian tanks are there with active anti-missile measures, and they're still getting killed. And it's scaring the hell out of us, because we saw some of these systems in Iraq, but they were not prevalent. In Syria, everybody has man-portable anti-tank systems that have a very impressive range, out to 3 kilometers, 3,000 meters. And if the challenge for a tank crew on the top of a ridge is if you have a man-sized target with a missile on a tripod and he's 3 kilometers away, you can almost never see them. It's so easy to camouflage, and the missiles are lethal. And so the Israelis came up with this system that detects incoming missiles, and right before the missile hits the tank, it shoots upward this exploding charge that in a microsecond it shoots upward, and then it blows up downward at the incoming missile, and it interrupts the missile. Problem is, in an environment where you're getting 10 missiles shot at you in a 5-minute period, you have to be able to reload the thing. And that's all it takes is the enemy shooting more than 1 missile at you at a time, because this Israeli system, just like the Russian system and the American, the Raytheon developed system, they were all tested with 1 incoming missile at a time. And in Sadr City, the Iraqis very quickly discovered how to take out an M1 tank. And it was for 8 guys to fire an RPG at it simultaneously. They don't run out there Marcus of Queensberry rules and fire 1. They were firing 8 at a time. And there was nothing the crew could do. All right, when we come back, a 70th anniversary and a 53rd birthday for a certain U.S. military aircraft. That and more coming up. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here live until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news. No, not the 70th anniversary of the B-52. No. They're doing good. We've sold a couple. My daughter custom makes the Kim Jong-un, the crazy Kim countdown clock.
To all of us, let's think about if we are ever told to evacuate, let's have a plan.
More than 250 people are still missing almost a week after the fire started last summer. The Canyon Fire 2 burning in the Anaheim Hills is
Maybe I should re-up on the Ricolas.
25 homes have been destroyed, 53 others damaged. A man from Huntington Park called the office frequently.
Yeah, go to the Facebook page. I think it's the pinned tweet. So go to the Dark Secret Place Facebook page, and you'll see it. I'll show you a picture. Now it's the 70th anniversary of the X1 of the breaking the speed of sound, just so that you're not. Yeah, it does. It all depends on the crew, by the way, too. American tank crews are generally better than everyone else. We do a better job of training guys than they do.
Traffic from your helpless SoCal hotbed traffic center crash in West LA on the 405.
That's going to be on the 405 northbound side of Olympic Boulevard. A crash there blocking the left lane. Traffic slows back to Venice Boulevard.
And see the minute and hour hands are missiles.
Over to Alameda Street. South LA, 110 south at Century Boulevard. Still got a crash there blocking the left lane. Traffic's going to be slow.
The Germans developed a anti-magnetic paste called Zimmerit, because the Russians had these shaped charge magnetic mines that it was like a grenade. You pulled a string and you stuck it to the side and you ran away, and when it blew up, it would shoot a hole into the tank. And so the Germans came up with this anti-magnetic paste called Zimmerit. And then the Russians, by the way, trained German shepherds to carry anti-tank mines on their backs and crawl under German tanks, and then they would blow it up. Keep in mind, we're talking about national survival. I mean, it sounds shitty, like, fuck you Russians, what are you doing? But, they had to find a way to counter German tanks.
Learn more today at carbonite.com/radio. That's carbonite.com/radio.
I think Fury was terrific. frankly. I thought it was. I didn't like the ending. The ending is kind of stupid, but Fury was really good. And then and then what was it? I'm wearing a Laco 1925 Flugzeuger. This is a Luftwaffe watch.
To your health, you need the smartest people on your side. Warriors with an unwavering passion to heal. Researchers
Back at 3517.
physicians with unmatched expertise. A team who understands your needs and will fight for you. See how we've helped others fight and win. Read patient stories and share yours. Visit KeckMedicine.org/KeckEffect. To make an appointment, call 800 USC Care. Keck Medicine of USC. Beyond exceptional medicine.
The annual Latin Business Association Business Expo is happening Thursday, October 19th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Castaway located.
It's from the same company.
Join us to network
I mean, so it's an original. It's not from 1925,
products or simply grow. If you're a business owner or thinking of
but nothing is different on it.
Business Expo, Thursday, October 19th at the Castaway
It's the original machinery.
USA.com.
Uh,
LBAUSA.com or call 213-628-8516. See you there.
The helpful SoCal Honda dealers are proud to announce the Blue Apple Award to honor hardworking teachers in LA. Nominate a teacher that's made an impact in your community for a chance to reap with school supplies and more. Visit KFIAM640.com for more help. To next
Rob here. Check out Houston's security system that's 300% more likely to be looking into. They're the ones I choose. And after I steal your stuff,
okay.
I have great
Oh, it keeps great time. It's amazing.
Their security expertise protects me.
I love it.
Hey, I may be a burglar, but I'm no idiot.
schedule your free security review today at bayalarm.com.
KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight. And tomorrow, the Chargers are playing, but it's a early game, so it won't affect Super Hyperlocal Sunday, which will be on at its regular time, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Roll-up of all the news here in the Southland. A North Korea wrap-up. What is being monitored right now in North Korea is the movement, and this is usually South Korean intelligence are the ones who leak this stuff, but the South Koreans are saying that they are detecting the movement of North Korean TELs, TELs, which are transporter erector launchers, and these are those gigantic, 30-wheeled trucks that the North Koreans scoot their missiles around the country. And very effectively, by the way, are able to hide them from us because they have tunnels all over the place. So they move them at night. They rarely move them in the day, and they even have done some night launches lately to absolutely catch us with our pants down. Even though usually there's a type of aircraft, a U.S. Air Force RC-135 called Cobra Ball, and its entire job is to detect ballistic missile launches. The issue, though, is that we only have like 6 of them, and so it's hard to do 24-hour coverage. And so we basically follow the windows, and the window is in Pyongyang time on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays. Something like 90% of their launches have been on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday before 10 a.m. local time. So, for instance, right now it is 3:07 in the afternoon. So if we haven't heard anything by now, they probably are not going to launch anything on Sunday their time. But tomorrow afternoon, around 2 p.m. Pacific time, it'll be Monday in North Korea. And that is the sort of the dominant, the leading, consistent time that they've been launching have been Sundays, unless, of course, a big holiday happens. If a holiday happens, they have launched tested missiles to celebrate holidays and things like that. This is where they telegraph their punches on this. They're a little predictable, but they see it as there's a greater purpose for doing it. They know that we're going to monitor the tests anyway, and so they have to test them, or they have to show that they work, and all that. So what's happening is that several tells have been detected moving around the country. Now, the North Koreans, you don't hear about this when they do launch a missile, and the U.S. Air Force or Pacific Command usually breaks the news via Twitter. What they're not telling you is that part of the reason the launches are oftentimes missed, the real launch, is because the North Koreans will send out 4 or 5 decoys. And so for that reason, we have to give each decoy a fair shot, because we don't want to miss a launch. We don't want to miss data at the boost phase. Because one of the first things that the Cobra Ball aircraft does is it projects, it extrapolates where the missile is likely to impact. Because much at the launch is revealed about where the missile is going to impact. Quite a bit, in fact. If the missile is leaving, at a nearly 90-degree straight-up angle, like they shot 2 of their most capable missiles, the Hwasong-14, they shot 2 of those 7 times higher than the International Space Station for a 46-minute time of flight. And the angle of fire on that was like 3 degrees. Now, that is not how you reach San Pedro. If you're going to actually hit the United States, you need to leave the North Korean peninsula at about 38 degrees. Not 45, but about 38 degrees. So if a missile ever was in that window, then the Cobra Ball aircraft would see that almost immediately. Now, the other thing that you need to know is that we don't really have, I don't have any faith in the launch authority of any American Aegis-class Navy cruiser or the ground-based missile defense, the THAAD. We don't have a way, nor do I think we would actually take out a missile in the boost phase. And after all, the THAAD system, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System, that's meant to counter the missile after its apogee, on its way back down. It's not a tail chaser. Cough button. And so we don't have a credible way of shooting it down in the boost phase. But the North Koreans are probably they're set for another launch, and this is probably just another regular test and the whole thing. What the punchline is about North Korea, and I think that President Trump is coming around to this, and I think that in the case of some of his closest advisors, whether it's the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, or General Kelly, the Chief of Staff, is they're telling Trump, there is not a way to denuclearize North Korea. There just is not. So you can say that it's unacceptable all day long, but there's no way to denuclearize them. Why would they? For what reason would they undo 20 years of work? There's not a bribe big enough that you could give them. And so this is something that he has to come around to. There's not a 10-day series of airstrikes where you could take out North Korea's nuclear capability. They're not going to give it up voluntarily. There's nothing that the world's going to do, and the reason is that the Chinese know, and people who take North Korea seriously know, that the North Koreans do in fact believe it is worth going to war to keep their nukes. So that's not negotiable. So what does a resolution look like? Well, Trump said plainly today in a tweet that he's open to negotiations with North Korea. And if such negotiations happen, and I think quietly they are right now, it would probably wind up with something like this. We would acknowledge that North Korea is a nuclear power. North Korea would grudgingly acknowledge that South Korea has a right to exist and that they will not seek violent reunification through means of war on the Korean Peninsula. And they would also have to recognize that American forces are in Korea and will be in Korea and will always be in Korea until the South Koreans ask us to leave. So that's how that would... Now, if the North Koreans don't want to budge on that, then they might have a problem. But I don't know what that problem would be. I don't know what we would do to them beyond what we are doing to them right now. But that's how, yes, there is a world where North Korea has nukes. We're currently living in it. And so that is what a deal would probably look like, is an actual formal, and this is probably what it would also include, is that the ceasefire would be over. An actual peace treaty would have to be signed. The North Koreans would have to agree that the state of war that has existed since June of 1950 and then wound up with a ceasefire in 1953, that would have to end with a peace treaty. And in that peace treaty, they would have to recognize South Korea's right to exist and American forces' right to be in South Korea. And they would have to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, and claim no first use and all that. And the North Koreans will find, if they do that, if they give a little, then yes, the world can live with a nuclear North Korea. Now, will North Korea use it to blackmail everybody? Of course they will. It's what they do. They do it with dead bodies. They do it with the corpses of American soldiers from the Korean War. It's what they do. So if you allow them, if you acknowledge their right to have nukes, then yeah, you better be ready for them to threaten to use nukes if they're not included in the World Cup, and stuff like that. All right, we'll be back right after this. Some thoughts on Vegas, and then also the Iran nuclear deal. What exactly happened? Did the president negate the deal? And what is the big picture there? And that and more. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here, live streaming, by the way, at unsheepyourself.com and tweeting at Dark Secret Place. So join us for one more break here, and then in here till midnight. Yeah, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
Also, a 120,000 square foot fabric warehouse has burned in a major fire on South Soto Street in LA. Or actually, I should say Boyle Heights. The fire started before 7 o'clock tonight. Took 130 firefighters more than 2 hours to control it.
Here's the thing. It's extremely expensive. The Australians, the Filipinos, Malaysia, none of them would build nukes. They just would not. It's just too expensive. Just flat out too expensive. The only reason that North Korea can do it is because they get to starve their population. Now, yeah, Japan can, because that's kind of the unspoken thing. Is once you have a nuclear power grid like the Japanese do, you have hundreds of tons of nuclear fuel that you can enrich and concentrate and extract plutonium from and all that. Well, that's the Japanese. The Japanese have 20 or 30 different nuclear plants, and then the leap from using nuclear fuel rods for boiling water and making electricity to actually enriching them is not a big leap. So the Japanese would be probably 5 years away from their own nuke. So yeah, they do. The Japanese in their constitution, they can't go on offensive war. That's why their military is called the Japanese Self-Defense Forces. The Army is the ground self-defense force. The Air Force is the air self-defense force and all that. But the Japanese have also shown that, they can, their constitution can be changed really quick. I don't know. You can look on... Look at cheaperthandirt.com. I think they have some full prepared like first aid bug out bags. But honestly, you want to put your stuff into a bug out bag anyway. You want to put, your best boots at the bottom, empty water collection bags, like Camelbacks. Like take 3 or 4 Camelbacks. The reason being, if you're bugging out, you might find potable water, and so you need to be able to collect as much of it as you can because you don't know when you're going to see it again. So roll up some Camelbacks, put them in your bug out bag, a good trauma kit, and maybe tomorrow on here on the YouTube channel I'll go through my first aid kit. I basically carry a medic's bag. I carry a trauma bag for slashes, gunshots, penetration, stuff like that. Whoa.
If the hot water heater leaks 5 years and 9 months down the road, we'll install a new one for free, including labor.
That's crazy talk, Jose.
Maybe crazy, but it's true.
I'm Mike Diamond, and I guarantee my plumbers will show up on time and smell good.
Or your water heater house call.
Is free. Have a smell good plumber diagnose your hot water heater for free. Call 1-800-446-MIKE or check out the water heater's page at MikeDiamond.com. Contractor license number 399179.
Everyone does it in the living room, the garage, the kitchen table. Everyone you know, your kid's teacher, your neighbor, the coffee guy. They are doing it right. Don't tell them this is radio. Radio is huge. Ads like this connect to 93% of Americans.
We're going to do the Marquettes one more time.
You reach more of who you want. More boomers, more Gen Xers, even more millennials. So get to iHeartMedia.com for the one place everyone is. AM/FM radio.
Sharon Bellio, I love this time of year. Nothing's better than lying in bed on a cool, crisp autumn night and drifting off to a quiet, restful night's sleep. But if you or your loved one has sleep apnea, the sounds of snoring may be echoing throughout the whole house. CPAP is typically used as the first line of treatment for sleep apnea, but studies show up to 50% of people who have a CPAP machine
In October 1947, at Muroc Desert Test Center in California, history is made by this aircraft, the XS-1, and its pilot, Captain Charles E. Yeager. This airplane and this pilot are about...
Yeah, you know what, I don't, when people roll their eyes, go, oh, you're a prepper, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you what, go tell the people in Sonoma, go tell the people in Sonoma that if they were more prepared to haul ass out of their homes, that they'd be stupid.
Place your cell phone or keys. That's what every day feels like for a person with Alzheimer's. For more than 36 years, Alzheimer's Greater Los Angeles has provided free...
Because it's not, that's the thing, it's not just about like, oh, zombie apocalypse or earthquake. But there's gonna be an earthquake in LA at some point. But in the meantime, we're dealing with fires, like those fires in Anaheim last week. And so even a bug out bag might be just what you need to go to a hotel for the night. Your prescriptions and shit like that. Oh. And then leave it up. I've got a thing to play. Yeah, you know what? Deodorant. You're not going to worry about deodorant. I got news for you there. KFI, AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the dark secret place. Brian Suits in here one last time, and I'm backloading a bunch of stuff. Birthdays. It's the 53rd birthday of the Sikorsky CH-53 helicopter, which has served the Marine Corps primarily for 53 years. Very, very successful helicopter. The Germans fly it. The Israelis love the CH-53. In fact, the Israelis love the CH-53 so much that the Boeing Vertol MV-22, the Osprey, the Israelis have been evaluating it for like a year, and it seems made to order for the Israelis. They don't care about, range or anything. They care about lift and flexibility and the whole thing, and something like an Osprey that could fly as an airplane quickly into enemy air and come back out and pick up pilots and all that. They suspended the evaluation. They said, this doesn't do anything that our CH-53s don't do right now. And the CH-53 first flew on this date in 1964, and it has been modified consistently over the years and years and years. Probably most famous for the Desert One debacle, which was not the CH-53's fault. It was the fault of the Navy putting the wrong kind of pilots and the wrong kind of helicopters, but anyway, that's 53 years old. Also, 70 years ago today, even though the Air Force celebrated it yesterday with flyovers everywhere, today is the 70th anniversary of man breaking the sound barrier.
47 at Muroc Desert Test Center in California. History is made by this aircraft, XS-1, and its pilot, Captain Charles E. Yeager.
Charles C.
This
Yeager.
airplane and this pilot are about to be the first ever to fly faster than the speed of sound in level flight.
And there you go. Yeah, and it was a rocket-powered plane. The Bell XS-1, as he correctly pointed that out in 1947, was shaped like a 50 caliber machine gun bullet because that was an object known to break the sound barrier. And there were scientists and engineers who were really positive that the sound barrier was like the firmness of the earth. It was something that just a man-made machine couldn't break it. There were others, especially the pilots, who said, no, it's an artificial construct, and it just requires the right aircraft to fly it. And so the Right Stuff, the movie The Right Stuff, read the book. If you like the movie, you should read the book. But effectively, the story was correct, that the Bell Aircraft Company had a test pilot who really was named Slick Goodland. And he was very highly paid. And he was a guy that Bell wanted to take the XS-1 into the regime after the speed of sound. But he wanted too much money. And the Air Force wound up going to Yeager, who was there as a test pilot at Muroc Army Airfield, as it was called at the time, because no one had died yet to name it. And luckily for everyone who wanted it to be called Edwards Air Force Base, Captain Glenn Edwards died in October of 1947, flying the B-49 bomber, the original flying wing. So they named it Edwards Air Force Base after it being called Muroc Army Airfield for years and years and years. And why is it called Muroc? Well, it's because the family that settled, the dry lake, as you drive on the 14 up to Mojave and you pass through Rosamond, you know there's a gigantic dry lake there, right? The space shuttles landed there. Well, the family that homesteaded there was called the Corum family. C-O-R-U-M, and they had to name the stop for the train and name the lake, so they just reversed their name and called it Muroc. And so it's not some ancient Indian name or something, it's just this family's name backwards. So Yeager was there at the U.S. Air Force test pilot school, and in 1947 we were just entering the age of jets and all that. So Yeager on this date, 1947, was the first man to exceed the speed of sound in level flight in the XS-1. He was also the first guy to go Mach 2. So he's got the double dip there, Mach 1 and Mach 2 in the X2, the follow-on to the X1. But anyway, it is on this date, and Chuck Yeager, if he's active on Twitter, at Gen Chuck Yeager, very, very active on Twitter. He is irascible and salty. And if you, like a typical interaction, like little Jimmy McDougal from, BF, Iowa, will text a question to Chuck Yeager and say, what's the best, dear General Yeager, I really, really admire you. What's the best plane you ever flew? And his answer will be, what's the mission? So just say P-38, just something. Just throw something out at the kid. But he always goes, what's the mission? Or depends on the mission. Or someone will say, General Yeager, what's the worst crash you were ever in? And he'll come back and go, read the book. And so the book Yeager, which also I highly recommend. I mean, obviously he wrote it, but he's not very self-critical. But he's an American icon. He gets to talk any way he wants because the guy really truly was an astounding fighter pilot in World War II. He shot down 5 German planes in one day, became an ace in one day. And was an astounding pilot, but he didn't go to college, so he wasn't NASA material. NASA, well, that is true. He didn't fit the NASA profile for what they wanted for the Mercury program, and they didn't care that he was the best living pilot. That there was a handful of Americans there at Edwards Air Force Base who were clearly the best pilots alive. NASA didn't care. NASA wanted the right guys in there. And Yeager, if you read between the lines of Yeager, because today someone asked him on Twitter, do you regret not being an astronaut? And his answer was, I didn't want to clean the monkey poop out of the seat anyway. Because that was the whole joke, was they sent chimps up first. So anyway, there's that. So that's the 70th anniversary of the breaking of the sound barrier. If I were in charge of Air Force Public Affairs, I would have done a sonic boom at that very moment. But it was heard for the first time this morning over the Antelope Valley. It's sort of the east end of the Antelope Valley. And it was a sound that some scientists had theorized. They had said, well, the physical act of breaking the sound barrier might include as the sound waves are compressed against the plane, there might be a release. As the plane accelerates through there, they have to go somewhere. And so that was the first sonic boom that was heard. And the phenomena of seeing an aircraft and then it gets over your head and you still can't hear it yet, and then it passes you and now you start to hear the sound. That was the first time today in 1947. And it also is true, Right Stuff is correct about this, the Air Force did not have some big announcement ready to go. It was several weeks in months before the Air Force confirmed that out in the high desert of California, yes, we have a plane and it went faster than the speed of sound. We didn't even tell the British. The British were trying very hard to be the first to break the sound barrier. And the British had a very famous test pilot, Geoffrey de Havilland, who was part of the de Havilland family, who was killed trying to break the sound barrier. The British were trying very hard to be the first to go past the speed of sound. So when we did it, we didn't make a big press release. We hung on to the information and then later on released it. So anyway, that was today. 1947. All right, so Super Hyperlocal Sundays at 8 p.m. tomorrow, and join us back here, won't you please? And then I'll be in here with Bill Handel on Tuesday for Tactical Tuesday and stuff. And then tomorrow, pay attention, I might do a prepper, if worst case scenario, like what happened to these people up in Sonoma. This is astounding. Like, why do you want to make a bug out bag? Is it because you're a prepper nutbag? No, because it happened down in Anaheim last week too. I mean, do you have a way where you could just simply grab one bag, even if your house is not burnt down? If they come along and say mandatory evacuation, do you have a place where all your prescriptions, coloring books for the kids, toys, and maybe some power bars, stuff like that, and some vitamin waters or whatever, do you have one bag that you can just grab and then maybe go over to where all your crucial documents are, grab those, put that in the car, get the pets. Don't leave your pets behind. Who the hell does that? And then go. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. A bug out bag special tomorrow in the afternoon, right here on the YouTube channel, unsheepyourself.com. All right, we will see you tomorrow night here for Super Hyperlocal Sunday, everyone. And thanks to Hector, thanks to Michael Chapin, and thanks to all of ye streaming there on YouTube. We'll see you tomorrow here on KFI, AM 640, more stimulating talk. All right, I'm going to sign off, and we will talk more tomorrow.